صباح الخير.
Good morning. صباح الخير.
Mohaned.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me share my
Welcome.
screen. Thank
You
you.
can start your session, please. And we have panelists here, Dr. Shireen, Dr. Corvo, and Dr. Agarwal from UAE, Bahrain, Italy, but in UAE. تفضل مهند.
Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see my slides? Abdullah, can you see my slides? Good morning. Hello. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Mohaned, go ahead, please.
And you could, okay, so thank you. First of all, thank you, Abdullah, and for the organizing committee for the great opportunity. And I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person, although the plan was to be there in person, but there we go. My task is to talk about management of entrapped or broken burr. This is my conflict of interest. You'll all be familiar with the rotablation system. There is capital equipment that don't change the console, the foot pedal, and now, of course, the Rotabro with the handle only, and the disposable, the wire, the advancer, and the burr. And of course, you could have a problem with most of them, but the one that are more concerning are the one that inside the body, which is the wire and the burr. So my focus is going to be on the burr. And despite the mechanical complexity of the rotablator system, device failure is really a rare event. And that's really something has to be kept in mind. So we'll focus first on the trapped rotaburr. Yesterday, you've heard a little bit about this, and you've seen a case. You all know what the composition of the rotaburr is. You've got the sheath, which is 4.3 French, and that could be removable. That's important to know when, if the burr gets stuck. You have the drive shaft, and you have the guide wire, of course, and the diamond-coated burr, which comes from different sizes, from 1.25 to 2.5. Increasing by 0.25 increment. So what happens when the burr gets stuck? Usually, when you're using the rotablation, there's a lot of calcium, a tight channel to go through, and you're trying to burr through and break the calcium. The burr could go through and then get stalled behind the stenosis with the calcium, and you cannot retrieve it. And this can be quite disastrous. So it is a rare and challenging complication to deal with. And that why it happens because the burr will slip across the region without the burring, i.e. without the effect on the calcium and the modification of the calcium, because the coefficient of friction is less at high speed than at the rest. And of course, as you know, one of the mechanism of rotablation is rotational advancement. So if you have a high speed and probably a smaller burr, and you're pushing hard against the lesion, the burr could go through without creating enough channel for it to come back, because there aren't any diamonds on the back end of the burr. The second mechanism is the ledge of the calcium behind the elliptical burr causes a Kokoshi phenomenon. Kokoshi is, you heard yesterday, it's a wooden doll found in northern Japan, which consists of a simple trunk but a large head akin to the rotablator. So it looks like a rotablator burr. And also the burr may get entrapped in a tortuous segment of the lesion. These are the reasons why. But importantly, it is usually when you're pushing on the burr and having no patience, and it is quite, most of the time, it's operator related. So how can you manage this? There are simple steps that can be taken, and there are a little bit more complicated one, reaching even the subintimal dissection and re-entry. In the simple one, quite often, if you try to push forward with activation or dynaglide, of course, when the burr stalls, sometimes you cannot activate it anymore, but trying to push on it, not allow it to move away from the tight part of the artery could allow you to do this. And on one occasion, even using dynaglide does help. Normal straight pulling, really, this could be a little aggressive, but you could do that, and sometimes that comes back. And I think this was the case that was presented yesterday. It wasn't normal, it was quite a hard pulling. You have to deep guide, really engage the guide very deeply, then pulling, and that gives you a little bit of protection of the artery, because if you're pulling on the burr and it's stuck, it will suck everything in, and it can lead to dissection and problems. And the second, the other option you could do, passing a second wire next to the burr and trying with a small balloon to inflate and create a channel. If you are able to push the burr forward, but you're unable to take it back, you push it forward and you try to slide the small balloon next to the burr shaft and inflate it there to create some channel to be able to bring it back. When it comes to more complex, it's the guide extension with the child and the mother technique. We described this and published it about 15 years ago, where you cut the shaft and you have to remove the outer sheath of the burr. You take it all the way out and then you slide the the guide extension on top of the shaft all the way down to where the lesion is and where the burr is stuck. And by traction, counter traction, you'll be able to take it. Of course, there's the snaring, and at the end, there's the subintimal dissection and re-entry. So let's go through these a little details, particularly the balloon trapping technique. You put a second wire next to the burr and in parallel, and a small balloon is advanced as far as it'll go, and the guy on the second guide wire and inflate it to high pressure facing the entrapped burr. Once you've done this, you will create a little bit of channel, and once you'll be able to move the burr forward and backward, and then hopefully you'll be able to take it back. It is not always effective because if you think about the mechanism at what happened, the burr has gone through without creating a proper channel, and there might still be quite a lot of calcium to allow you to pull it back. But it has been used and it has worked on many occasions. Again, this is the guide extension, as we said. So I go back to this, where you have to cut the shaft and get the guide extension all the way down to the burr. With traction and counter traction, you'll be able to pull the burr back. Multiple kind of snares. Again, this is quite a little cumbersome, but can be done. You could use the gooseneck snare, or you could use the tulip one, which is the trifold snare. Advance it over the shaft all the way down as far as it'll go, and then you try to pull the burr with the snare together. Advanced technique that usually are really people who are familiar with the dissection re-entry, where you could advance a second wire in the subintimal space upstream from the entrapped burr, and you re-enter to the normal artery downstream from the burr, and then you use a balloon inside on the subintimal space on the second wire where the balloon is trapped and where the lesion is, and you modify the lesion from outside to allow you to crack the calcium and to create more channel, so you'll be able to pull this burr back. And of course, this can pull the burr back, but you really have to be familiar with this technique from the start. And it's quite an elegant way of doing it, because if you are able to keep your wire, the true wire, even if it's the rota wire, once you've taken the burr out, and if you can leave the wire, and you could exchange on top of that wire to a normal angioplasty and do your angioplasty in that way in the true lumen, and you forget the subintimal space. But if it's not, you could still do it as if you're doing a CTO case, i.e. stent from the true lumen proximally to the true lumen distally, bypassing the calcium in that area. And of course, algorithms are there. You probably have seen this before. It's simple and easy. Guide extension on top of the rota using a second wire balloon, a summary of what we can do, and it's usually effective. Of course, if all fails, surgeon have to be called in, and they might have to go. This is a very, very rare occasion, and I think we have enough percutaneous tool to be able to deal with this. Again, a simple one, another. So as always, there are multiple algorithm that they are easily available for everyone. So how do you prevent it? And this is probably the most important thing. To my mind, this is the important part. When you're advancing your burr, when you get there, you release the tension. You push and pull the catheter and activate it on dynaglide. So you release the tension on the wire, so the burr will not jump forward and will not be able to get stuck. A very gentle approach. You really, quite often, they talk about low speed. If you are at the high speed and you're pushing on the burr, that could easily allow the burr to go through the lesion without being prepared well and get stalled. Slow burr advancement is really important. And you always have to be listening and watching the burr. If you're listening and you hear the high pitch and sometimes even a hissing noise, you know that there's a lot of resistance and the burr could easily slip through and stall. And that's kind of a warning sign. So always make sure you do not push and you do not continue to burr. You stop and bring it back and approach it slowly and take your time. In the case of the second one is, if the burr shaft disconnection. This is another complication that could be very difficult to treat. If the burr is stuck and you try to pull it, you could break the shaft, and that can be really, as I said, difficult to treat. The burr is stuck, you pull it back, and the shaft broken. And this could be within or outside the guide catheter. And both of these can be troublesome. Inside the guide catheter may be a little bit easier. And this is what happens. The burr is stuck, you pull back and you break it, you break the shaft. This becomes a retrieval for a foreign body in the coronary artery. So the first step to inspect the whole shaft, to use the fluoroscopy, just to find out where the disconnection has happened. Balloon trapping technique, if the break is within the guiding catheter, simple and easy. You just introduce a balloon, inflate it high, and pull everything out. If the break is outside the guiding catheter, that could be troublesome. Snaring can be appropriate, but might not be as easy as it is. The only saving grace is you still have a wire inside the shaft, so sometimes you are able to do this. And if the burr is not stuck, then you should be able to take it back. And again, a simple algorithm. I find it interesting that they tell you conservative approach on both of them, but I don't know what that's considered. If you leave the burr obviously inside the artery, it's not a good thing. So yeah, if the burr is broken, you could trap it to the balloon and bring it back, or you could snare it. Of course, surgery always remains an option if you are unable to deal with this. There's one condition that also you have to be careful, and this is why using rotablation in already deployed stent can be difficult. If the wire under the stent struts and the rota is blocked. Again, this can be quite difficult to treat because you will be faced with multiple resistant area to be able to take the burr. The burr can go through, particularly the small one, the 1.25 at high speed, it will create a channel and it'll go through and get stuck. So if it is stuck behind the burr strut, you need to make sure that what you're dealing with. And because if it is under the implanted stent strut, the option can be limited. You need to understand the situation, maybe using imaging, i.e. putting a second wire in either IVUS or OCT to confirm the wire position. The guide extension technique here becomes quite important because you are able to get the guide extension tip all the way close to the burr. So traction, counter traction, you could probably take this burr out. Possibly a second wire and a balloon, but of course you'll have to be, the balloon has to be also behind the strut to open the channel and move the stent away from the wall, and that's not an easy thing. Otherwise, surgery in these cases is the only option. Again, an algorithm. The conservative approach remains up there, and I don't understand why, but there we go. This is from the Europa group that's been published on EuroBCR online. So how do excuse me, how do we prevent all this? You really have to be aware of proper position of the rota wire, especially when passing or addressing implanted stent. And this is particularly important in the freshly implanted stent. A lot of people shy away from using rotablation in a freshly implanted stent because first of all, you could damage the stent. And I have seen a case, it was a live case at one stage a few years ago, where one operator was doing the rota, put the stent in, but they could not expand it. They wanted to burr through the stent. The second operator came in, wasn't aware of what happened exactly. They took the rotaburr and you heard the noise, and all of a sudden everything became completely out of hand, and the stent came out on the burr, all dismangled, and of course the artery dissected and almost shredded to pieces. So you really have to be careful using the rotablation in freshly implanted stents. The older one usually, or the older stent, is a little bit easier because they would have endothelialized and they are more stable in position, but they could still cause a problem. You need to prevent the burr stalling by keeping the speed, not pushing too hard against the lesion, not pushing too hard to get through the lesion. And of course, you have to verify the connection. With this, I will say thank you. And I hope that this complication doesn't happen very often, because it's all related to how we do it and how we approach the lesion. Be patient, take your time, picking technique, get the lesion, let the burr do its job without much pressure and bring it back, take it back and forth until you are able to modify the lesion and not lead to this burr installment. But if it does get installed, there are techniques that can be used. Thank you.
Thank you very much.